Welcome to British Focus, where we expose the absurdity of those in power and bring you the real stories they'd rather you ignore. If you're tired of Labour's incompetence and their endless war on the backbone of this country, our farmers, then hit that like button and subscribe, because today's topic will leave you fuming. Yesterday, thousands of farmers stormed London, fed up with a government that treats them like an afterthought. Tractors clogged the streets, banners flew high, and their voices rang out loud and clear: enough is enough. These are the men and women who keep Britain fed, yet according to Labour, they're just collateral damage in their latest tax schemes and green policies dreamt up by bureaucrats who have never set foot on a farm. But, of course, the government response was predictable: silence, indifference, and a complete lack of accountability. Rural Britain is in crisis, yet the party that claims to stand for the working class is nowhere to be seen. How convenient.
Thousands of farmers are once again rallying outside the gates of this building. Over the past 6 months, our farmers have repeatedly been told by this Labour government that their way of life is expendable, that their hard work, their sacrifice, their future can simply be priced up and taken away. So is it any wonder why our farmers have shown up in such vast numbers again today? And make no mistake, Mr. Chairman, it's not just our farmers outside these gates. Across the country, more than 148,000 people have signed the petition because they know, just as we do on these sides, on these benches, that the family farm tax is wrong. It is vindictive and it must be scrapped now. So I use this opportunity whilst talking about the petition to thank the Honourable Member for South Norfolk for leading this petitions debate. But I have to say, Dr. Murison, that I believe that he did a staunch disservice to those petitioners who put their faith in him to lead this debate by not actually forming any opinion based on the strong arguments that he absolutely communicated, but didn't form an opinion. Just a mere spokesman, not using his opportunity in this debate to voice properly their concerns. And I must say, what an image for our farming community to take away from today's debate. Where on earth is the Secretary of State for DEFRA? We have the Shadow Secretary of State sat beside me. Where on earth is the Farming Minister? Absent. And what message does it send that the Labour Party have clearly filled the benches up on the other side of this House, but only 4 members of the Labour Party spoke in this debate, despite having an opportunity to voice their concerns in this petitions debate, which effectively is a 3-hour debate, of which, Mr. Chairman, all 5 of them that spoke voted against scrapping the family farm tax when we brought the motion to the House last time. So this is probably one of the most important debates that we can have on this issue, but yet once again, those with responsibility for rural areas and our farmers are missing in action. Indeed, Mr. Chairman, there is Labour members on the other side of the House that have turned up but not even contributed in this debate, yet representing such vast, large rural constituencies. So where is this government that claims to be on the side of rural Britain? Because if they had actually visited some of their farming communities, they would know just how damaging their choice is to implement the family farm tax is on our farming community. They may have had some of the devastating conversations that I, and indeed many on this side of the House, have had, including the Shadow Secretary of State, have had on this issue. And I would like to go through and share some of them. Mr. Chairman, just last week I was in Northamptonshire and I met George. George has worked on his farm all of his life, and he is nearly in his 80s. And he, right now, unfortunately, is extremely ill. He knows, through his diagnosis, that he hasn't got long to live, but he isn't sure right now as I speak if he'll live beyond April 26. He knows that should he pass away before April 26, his IHT bill will be 0. But if he passes away after April 26, his tax bill to his family will be well over £1 million, a debt which his family simply cannot sustain. Now, Mr. Chairman, taking his own life was an option which was put forward to me. Mr. Chairman, these are horrific choices unthinkable amounts of pressure for any individuals or families to be put under, never mind some of the most vulnerable in our society, and I will give way.
He was giving a very powerful speech. It's true that George was given no notice, was he? No ability to plan for this absolute and important impact on his life and everything he's worked for. But isn't it worse than that? Because explicitly he relied on a promise not to do this, and that makes it particularly unforgivable.
And I could not agree more. I will just answer this point before giving way. I cannot agree more with the point that has just been made by my right honourable friend, because what the electorate was sold was false promises in the run-up to the general election. They were specifically told that this Labour government would not change agricultural property relief, but that is exactly what they have done. So I will ask the Minister, how will he communicate with George? What does he tell George based on the promises that were given in the run-up to the general election? And will he acknowledge, for I can't believe how many times I have asked this, will the government commit to recording suicide statistics across the farming sector as we move closer to April 26? And if the Minister is so determined to carry on with his family farming death tax, will the Minister at least look at changing the abruptness of this tax's implementation to protect the most vulnerable in our farming community? It cannot just be right that this government is forcing people into these decisions to make. Mr. Chairman, another point that has been made is that this tax also hits our next generation. The very young people that we need to be powering our industry forward to the future. So what did the Minister say to Gemma, the granddaughter of a lifelong farmer who has been forced to split up their family's farm, leaving their future in doubt? What did the Minister say to the thousands of young farmers up and down the country, indeed many of those who are right outside this building now, who are in similar situations because of this government's choices? Indeed, I spoke to a few of them outside before coming into this House. Indeed, these concerns have also been raised by the member, my right honourable member, the member for Dumfries and Galloway and East Hampshire and their contributions. And then there is the tenant farmers, Mr. Speaker. Around a third of agricultural land is farmed by tenants. Just recently, I was speaking to Tom, a tenant farmer who stands to lose not only his livelihood, but also his family home, as his landlords scramble to reduce their IHT liability before April 26. The Tenant Farmers Association is already warning of the mass renegotiation of many agricultural tenancies ahead of the family farm tax kicking in. So for the tenant farmers, there is no protection because the government didn't see it fit to recognise their unique situation. So will the Minister recognise the injustice tenants like Tom are being exposed to through this government's choices and provide protections for those with tenancies? And for the whole agricultural sector, there has been many points made by members on this side of the House, including my honourable friend for Cheshire and Eddlesbury, who has been talking about the wider implications on our food sector. And just last week, I was at the Yorkshire Agricultural Machinery Show, which I attended just last week, and met a tractor dealer, which is also a family business, that are struggling to stay afloat. And why? Because confidence is draining from the farming sector, and they are seeing orders for new tractors and machinery equipment significantly being reduced. And I will give way to the honourable member.
It's almost laughable, if it weren't so infuriating. Yesterday, in what should have been a defining moment of accountability, a parliamentary debate erupted over the government's disastrous tax hikes and their brutal impact on rural communities. You'd think this would be the perfect opportunity for Labour, the supposed champions of the working class, to show some concern for the people who put food on their tables. But no, the farming minister was nowhere to be seen, and Labour MPs? Silent. Missing in action. Apparently, speaking up for the agricultural sector was just too much effort. Instead, we got a fiery outburst from a minister who actually did show up, furious at the absolute disgrace unfolding before our eyes. And rightly so. The very people responsible for protecting rural Britain were absent, and when they did bother to make an appearance, they barely contributed a word to the debate. When pressed on their stance, they had nothing but vague, recycled nonsense to offer. But hey, why bother addressing the concerns of farmers when you can just tax them into oblivion and pretend everything's fine? Let's talk about what these tax increases actually mean for real people. George, an 80-year-old farmer who has worked his land his entire life, is now faced with an impossible reality. Thanks to Labour's latest scheme, if he dares to pass away after April 26th, his family will be hit with a tax bill of over £1 million. A man who has spent his life producing food for this country now finds himself caught in a cruel system that punishes him for simply existing. And here's the gut-wrenching part: taking his own life before the deadline was an option he seriously considered. That's the level of devastation we're talking about. This is what Labour's policies are doing to hard-working Britons. Now, let's be clear, this is not just about George. His story is just one of many playing out across the country. Entire families are being pushed into financial ruin, all because a bunch of clueless bureaucrats decided they needed more revenue to waste on God knows what. Farmers aren't just being taxed, they're being systematically squeezed out of existence. And Labour's response? Well, if they actually had one, we might be able to debate it, but they're too busy ignoring the problem. And it doesn't stop with the older generation. The younger farmers, the ones who are supposed to be the future of British agriculture, are seeing their livelihoods crumble before their eyes. Take Gemma, for example. She spent her life working on her family's farm, only to be forced to split it up just to survive. Think about that. A farm that has been passed down for generations is being broken apart because Labour decided they needed more cash. And these people have the audacity to say they support British industry? But wait, there's more. Because Labour's policies aren't just targeting farm owners. No, they're also coming for tenant farmers, the people who rent land to work on. These farmers have no protection whatsoever under the new tax scheme. Tom, a tenant farmer who has poured everything he has into his work, is now being evicted because his landlord is scrambling to reduce their tax liability before the April deadline. And here's the kicker: the Tenant Farmers Association has already warned that mass renegotiations of agricultural tenancies are on the horizon. So what does Labour have to say to these people? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And let's not forget the knock-on effects. The damage isn't limited to the farms themselves. It's hitting the entire agricultural industry. Machinery sales are plummeting. Tractor dealerships, many of which are family-run businesses, are struggling to stay afloat. Farmers aren't investing in new equipment because they don't know if they'll even be able to afford to keep their land. Confidence in the industry is collapsing. And why wouldn't it? When a government is actively working against you, why would you invest in your future? So where is the government? Where is Labour in all of this? If they actually spent some time in rural Britain, rather than sipping champagne at their endless receptions, they might have a clue. They might realise that their obsession with squeezing every last penny out of hard-working Britons is causing irreversible damage. But they don't care. They never have. They've lied through their teeth to the electorate, promising that agricultural property relief wouldn't be touched, and yet, here we are. And if you think this is the end of it, think again. The worst part? We're just getting started. If this government isn't stopped, if these policies aren't reversed, the damage will be permanent. Family farms will disappear, tenant farmers will be pushed out, and British agriculture, the very foundation of this country, will be left in ruins. But Labour will still stand there, shrugging their shoulders, pretending they don't know why the farming community is up in arms. They'll act surprised when rural Britain turns its back on them completely. They'll feign concern when it's far too late. And you know what? They deserve every bit of the backlash that's coming their way. And that's the reality Labour doesn't want to face. They can ignore the farmers, they can dodge debates, and they can pretend this crisis doesn't exist, but reality always catches up. The question is, how much damage will they cause before they're finally held accountable? Let me know what you think in the comments. Should this government be forced to reverse these disastrous policies? Or are we watching the slow death of British farming? If you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to British Focus for more coverage on the mess our so-called leaders keep making. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.